Welcome to my channel. My name is Julia Billig. I'm not an art historian, but I've been studying European history and art for many years. This project is non-commercial, and everything I do is for the soul. But I would be very grateful if you subscribe, share the link to my channel with your friends, like this video, and leave your feedback about what else you'd like to hear about. Today I will tell you about a place where stones remember more than people, about the Jewish quarter of Prague, Josefov, where 6 synagogues stood firm where empires crumbled. They survived medieval pogroms, survived the fire of 1689 that consumed the ghetto to ashes. They survived the Nazis, who planned to turn them into a museum of an extinct race. They endured. And this is not just architecture, it's a threshold to eternity, a history of memory, and a thread through time. So, Part 1. The Prague Jewish Ghetto, or Josefov. There is a place in Prague where time flows differently, where 12,000 tombstones lean against each other like mourners at an eternal funeral, where about 80,000 names cover the walls from floor to ceiling, not as decoration, but as accusation, where children's drawings of butterflies hang next to the words, "Died in Auschwitz." This is Josefov, Prague's Jewish ghetto. For 800 years, Jews lived here, on a territory slightly larger than a football field, where 18,000 people were crammed in medieval darkness. They couldn't leave. They couldn't expand. So they built upward and downward, synagogues reaching toward heaven, graves descending 12 layers into the earth. They created beauty in captivity. They transformed suffering into philosophy. They built Europe's oldest functioning synagogue, a Gothic masterpiece that has stood since 1270, surviving pogroms, fires, floods, Nazis, and communism. And then, in the 20th century, almost all of them were killed. What you're about to see is not just architecture, it's testimony. Every building here is a witness. Every stone tells a story. And I will guide you through all of this, from the legendary Golem sleeping in the attic to the unbearable silence of children's drawings in the Pinkas Synagogue. This is the most emotionally difficult video I've ever made, but these stories deserve to be told. History of the quarter. The Jewish community existed in Prague since the 10th century, but the official ghetto was formed in the 13th century, when the papal decree of 1215 and the decisions of the Fourth Lateran Council required the separation of Jews from the Christian population. The quarter was located between the Vltava River and the Old Town, on territory that regularly flooded during river overflows. By the 16th century, this became one of the largest Jewish ghettos in Europe. 7,000 people lived here, and according to some sources, up to 18,000 people at different periods, all on a tiny territory of approximately 93,000 square meters. Until the 1890s, the ghetto was a labyrinth of dark alleys 2 to 3 meters wide, where houses stood so close together that the upper floors hung over the pavement, almost touching. The sun rarely reached the ground. The main street was called wide. Ironic, it was only 5 to 6 meters wide. Filth, unsanitary conditions, and poverty coexisted with the wealthy homes of bankers and merchants. Epidemics of plague and cholera hit the ghetto especially hard, and all this next to the magnificence of synagogues, the sounds of prayers, the learning of rabbis, the wealth of culture. In 1850, after the Revolution of 1848, the ghetto was officially abolished and renamed Josefov, in honor of Emperor Joseph II, who in 1781 issued the Edict of Tolerance, which partially eased the situation of Jews. The Assignats of 1893 to 1913 was a massive reconstruction that destroyed most of the medieval ghetto, for sanitary and urban planning reasons. But also to modernize the city, hundreds of ancient houses were demolished. Narrow alleys were replaced with wide Art Nouveau boulevards. Of 31 synagogues, only 6 were preserved. The old Jewish cemetery and several synagogues survived only because of their historical value. Paradoxically, It was the Nazi occupation that saved the remaining monuments. Hitler planned to create a museum of an extinct race here after the final solution to the Jewish question. Therefore, confiscated Judaica from all over occupied Europe were brought here. More than 40,000 items from 153 liquidated communities in Bohemia and Moravia. Part 2. The Old Jewish Cemetery. This is one of the most atmospheric and eerie places in Prague, an ancient cemetery where, over 350 years, more than 100,000 people were buried on a tiny plot of 1 hectare. The cemetery was founded in 1439. The last burial took place in 1787, when Emperor Joseph II forbade burying the dead within city limits. Jewish tradition forbids disturbing graves, digging them up, moving bodies. But the authorities did not allow the cemetery to expand. The only solution: pour a new layer of earth over the old one. This resulted in 12 layers of burials. Some old tombstones were buried with the new layer of earth. Others were moved to the top. Therefore, the surface of the cemetery rose slightly above the level of the surrounding streets, and retaining walls had to be built. The result is stunning. 12,000 visible tombstones stand so tightly that it's impossible to walk between them. They're tilted at different angles, crawling over each other, sinking, forming a rolling sea of ancient stone. Old trees, elder, ash, push through between the slabs, their roots wrapping around the tombstones. Jewish tombstones are decorated with symbols that indicate the name, profession, tribe of Israel, or special merits of the deceased. For example, symbols by names: lion, Yehuda, Leib, Eri; wolf, She'efe, wolf; fish, dag, symbols by lineage and professions; blessing hands, priests, descendants of Aaron; pitcher pouring water on hands, Levites, temple servants, general symbols; grapevine, blessing, fertility. Famous graves in the cemetery. 1. Rabbi Judah Lo Ben Bezalel, the most famous grave in the cemetery. The Maharal was Prague's legendary rabbi, Kabbalist, mathematician, mystic, creator of the Golem. His tombstone is always covered with notes with requests and pebbles. According to Jewish tradition, stones are placed instead of flowers as a sign of eternal memory. His grave is a pilgrimage site. The tombstone depicts a lion and a bunch of grapes. It is believed that the Maharal possessed secret knowledge and was the greatest Kabbalist of his time. 2. Mordecai Mazel, mayor of the city, financier to Emperor Rudolph II, a fabulously wealthy man. He financed the construction of the Mazel Synagogue, hospitals, schools. He was called the Jewish King of Prague. The tombstone is decorated with complex symbolism of wealth and power. 3. David Gans, astronomer, mathematician, historian. Worked with Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler. Author of the chronicle Tzemach David. His grave depicts the Star of David with astronomical symbols. For Avigdor Kara, poet, author of elegies about pogroms. The oldest surviving tombstone in the cemetery. Part 3. Pinkas Synagogue, founded in 1535 by the Horowitz family. It was a private prayer house of a noble family, later becoming a community synagogue. Architectural style: late Gothic with Renaissance elements. In 1625, a Renaissance hall for women was added. In the 17th to 18th centuries, Baroque additions were made. In 1950 to 1959, transformation into a Holocaust memorial. Externally, this synagogue is a modest brick building adjoining the old Jewish cemetery. The facade is simple, without decorations, characteristic of late Gothic. The main hall is late Gothic, with rib vaults on thin ribs. The walls were originally white, decorated with modest paintings. The bima stood in the center, the Aron HaKodesh, where Torah scrolls are kept. It's on the eastern wall, Renaissance style, with stone carving. Women's gallery, added in the 17th century, a separate room with Renaissance vaults and stone columns. Women entered through a separate entrance. After World War II, the synagogue was turned into a memorial. On the walls, by hand, with ordinary brushes and paint, two artists, Yuri John and Václav Bostik, inscribed 77,297 names of Czech and Moravian Jews killed by the Nazis. What it looks like: walls, columns, vaults, everything is covered with names. Small font, name after name, line after line, from floor to ceiling. Black, red, brown letters on a light background. Each name is accompanied by date of birth. Date of deportation or death names are grouped by communities. Separately, Jews from Prague, Brno, Olomouc, small towns of Moravia and Bohemia. Surnames are written in reddish-brown, and the names that follow begin with a reddish-brown letter. And all these names from one surname to another are the names of members of one family. And these are large families. From the dates, it's clear that these are several generations of one family, all together doomed to death, only because they are Jews, and only for this reason. The effect is stunning. You stand in this bright Gothic hall, look up, names. Turn around, names. Go up to the second floor, names again. It's impossible to take in with your eyes, impossible to read them all. The scale of the tragedy becomes physically tangible. The work was carried out from 1954 to 1959. Names were inscribed by hand from deportation lists from archives. The artists used stencils for letters, but each name was applied individually. In 1968, after the invasion of Warsaw Pact troops, communist authorities closed the synagogue for reconstruction, partly due to damage from groundwater, partly due to unwillingness to remind people of the Jewish tragedy. The memorial was closed until the 1990s. After the fall of communism, the memorial was restored, names were rewritten, several hundred names identified in new archives were added. On the second floor, an exhibition that complements the memorial and breaks your heart. Terezín, a concentration camp ghetto 60 kilometers from Prague, which the Nazis presented to the International Red Cross as a model settlement for Jews. In reality, it was a transit camp. People lived there for several months, then were deported to Auschwitz and other death camps. About 15,000 children passed through Terezín. Only 242 survived, out of 15,000. In the camp, teachers secretly organized classes, drawing, theater, trying to preserve humanity and hope for the children. Children drew houses they remembered, flowers, butterflies, dreams of freedom. Some drew the horrors of the camp, gallows, trains, deportations. In the exhibition, hundreds of children's drawings are displayed, watercolors, pencil, ink. Next to each, the child's name, age, date of deportation, fate. You see a drawing of a butterfly made by a 6-year-old girl, and next to it, deported to Auschwitz on October 19th, 1944, died in the gas chamber. This is unbearable. The memorial operates as part of the Jewish Museum. Photography is allowed, but without flash. This place is not for curiosity, it's a place of mourning. Many visitors cry. Part 4. KLAUS Synagogue, where they studied the mysteries of the Talmud at the very exit from the old Jewish cemetery stand, 2 buildings, the KLAUS Synagogue, and the ceremonial hall in pseudo-Romanesque style. Here bodies were prepared for burial, here memorial prayers were read. The living saw off the dead, standing on the threshold between the world of people and the world of tombstones. 2 buildings, 1 function. Life transitions to death without a break. Let's return to the KLAUS Synagogue. In 1689, fire consumed the ghetto. 3 small buildings by the cemetery burned to ashes. KLAUSes. These were not ordinary synagogues. They were secret rooms where elders bent over ancient manuscripts, unraveling the puzzles of the Talmud and Kabbalah, where Rabbi Low once taught. Here no choirs thundered. Here prayers were whispered in small groups. Here they argued about the meaning of each letter of sacred text. Mordecai Maisel was already dead by then, but his gold continued to work. According to his will, on the ashes of 3 KLAUSes in 1694, one large synagogue was built, the KLAUS. The new synagogue became the largest in the ghetto. Baroque was coming into fashion, and the ghetto, rising from the ashes, dressed in Baroque lace of stucco. Enter, and above you spreads a bright hall with a high cylindrical vault. Stucco decoration in the form of ribbons and fruits. Windows with stars of David. And along the eastern wall, a 3-tiered Aaron HaKodesh of wood and artificial marble created in 1696 with money from Samuel Oppenheimer, an influential financier of the Habsburg monarchy. Around the perimeter of the hall, a second tier with a balustrade. Women's gallery. Women entered through a side entrance, went upstairs and prayed from there, to see but not be seen, to hear but not participate in reading the Torah. Tradition? Yes. Fair? Ask them. Now, the KLAUS Synagogue has become an unexpected bridge between worlds of the Jewish diaspora. Here they tell not about the Prague ghetto, but about other places where Jews lived, created, survived, and left behind treasures. On the second floor, the story of the Ben Ezra Synagogue in Old Cairo, one of the oldest synagogues in the world. Legend says it stands on the spot where baby Moses was found in the reeds of the Nile. But the main treasure of Ben Ezra is the Geniza, a repository for worn sacred texts. Jewish law forbids destroying texts containing the name of God, so they were stored in a special repository. On the attic of Ben Ezra, more than 1,000 years of such documents accumulated from the 9th to the 19th century. At the end of the 19th century, 2 Scottish twin sisters, Agnes Lewis and Margaret Gibson, traveled through the Middle East in search of ancient manuscripts. Educated, fearless, knowing ancient languages, they were Victorian Indiana Joneses in skirts. They drew attention to the Ben Ezra Geniza. Solomon Schechter, a Jewish scholar from Cambridge, went to Cairo in 1896 and brought back about 200,000 manuscript fragments. Merchants' letters, marriage contracts, medical recipes, philosophical treatises, poetry, an entire world of medieval Jewry, frozen in time. Dr. Charles Taylor of Cambridge helped organize the expedition. Today, the Cairo Geniza is kept in the Cambridge University Library, the world's largest collection of medieval Jewish texts. The exhibition also tells about the golden age of Jewish culture in Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus, 10th to 12th centuries. The Umayyad dynasty turned Cordoba into the cultural capital of Europe. Here Jews did not sit in ghettos. They were physicians to caliphs, astronomers, poets, philosophers, translators. Maimonides, the greatest Jewish philosopher of the Middle Ages, was born in Cordoba. His Guide for the Perplexed tried to reconcile Aristotle with the Torah, reason with faith. Yehuda Halevi, a poet whose verses are still sung in synagogues, wrote about love for Zion, about longing for Jerusalem, sitting in the gardens of Granada. Granada, under Muslim rule, became one of the centers of Jewish scholarship. Jews held high positions at court, built houses opposite the Alhambra, learned Arabic and Hebrew, read the Greeks in translation. And then came the Reconquista, 1492, the decree of Ferdinand and Isabella, convert or leave. The Jews of Spain scattered across the Mediterranean to Morocco, Turkey, Italy, Greece. Some made it to Prague. Why this exhibition in a Prague synagogue? Because the KLAUS Synagogue stands on a threshold between life and death, between worlds. And the exhibition is also about thresholds. Cairo and Prague, Granada and Josefov, Geniza and synagogue. All this fragments of one great story. The story of a people who had no land for 1,500 years, but carried their culture like a portable temple, in books, in prayers, in memory. The Jews of Cairo stored texts in a hiding place. The Jews of Prague buried tombstones in 12 layers. The Jews of Granada wrote poems about Jerusalem, which they had never seen. And then scholars from Cambridge came and said, "These scraps of paper are not garbage. These are the voices of the dead. These are letters from the past. This is important. The KLAUS Synagogue is no longer a museum of Jewish life. It has become a museum of memory, about how words survive when people die, about how manuscripts don't burn, about how history is assembled from fragments, from geniza, from tombstones, from poems, from Sinai to Cairo, from Cordoba to Prague, from Moses to Maimonides, one thread, and it hasn't broken." Part 5. Old New Synagogue, built around 1270. This makes it Europe's oldest functioning synagogue, and one of the first Gothic synagogues ever. The building survived pogroms, fires, floods, wars, Nazi occupation, and communist regime, and Orthodox services are still held here. The mystery of the name. Old New sounds paradoxical. There are several versions. One, linguistic version. A distortion of the Hebrew, al-Tanai, on condition, that is, the synagogue was built on condition, temporarily, until the third temple is built in Jerusalem. 2. Historical version, originally simply called New Synagogue. When even newer synagogues were erected in the 16th to 17th centuries, it became Old New, Old Among the New. 3. Legendary version. Angels brought stones from the destroyed Jerusalem temple for construction, on condition that after the coming of the Messiah they would be returned. Choose the one closest to you. This is a massive two-nave building of brick and sandstone with a high gable roof of characteristic brick red color. The facade is austere, almost fortress-like, thick walls, small narrow windows with Gothic tracery, buttresses supporting the walls. Characteristic detail. The toothed gable on the eastern side, a typical element of 13th century Prague Gothic civic architecture. The stepped gable creates a crown effect. The entrance is below street level. You need to go down several steps. According to one version, this is connected with the requirement that the synagogue must be built in the lowest place. According to another, simply the cultural layer over 750 years has risen, and the modern street turned out to be higher. Before the entrance, a small annex, foresal, a kind of vestibule where men could gather before and after prayer. It was added in the 17th century. You enter and find yourself in a space that transports you 750 years back. Two naves are separated by two massive octagonal sandstone pillars that support 5-ribbed vaults. 5 ribs instead of 4. This is a key feature. In Christian Gothic architecture, the standard cross vault has 4 ribs forming a cross. Here a 5th rib is added specifically to avoid the symbolism of the cross. Each vault section has 5 ribs radiating from the central keystone. The vaults are low, which creates a sense of intimacy, chamber quality, concentration. The height of the central nave is about 12 meters. In the very center of the prayer hall stands the bima, a square platform surrounded by a luxurious Gothic wrought iron grille from the 15th century. This is a masterpiece of medieval metalwork. Thin vertical bars intertwine with horizontal ones, forming geometric patterns, stylized grapevines. On the bima, a lectern for the reader, a table for unrolling Torah scrolls. During services, the main action happens here, reading the weekly portion, blessings. The location of the bima in the center is a fundamentally important feature of Orthodox Judaism. The community gathers around the Torah. By the eastern wall is the Aron HaKodesh, a niche or cabinet where Torah scrolls are kept, handwritten on parchment. The modern Aron is decorated with a Baroque tympanum from the 17th century with stucco and gilding. The double doors are decorated with plant motifs. Inside, a velvet curtain embroidered with gold and silver. Before the Aron hangs the Natamid, a lamp that never goes out, symbolizing God's eternal presence and memory of the temple menorah. The walls are covered with remnants of medieval inscriptions, quotes from psalms and prayers in Hebrew, executed in black paint on a light background. Almost no original paintings survived, but in the 19th century remnants of 14th, 15th century texts were uncovered. No images of people or animals, strict adherence to the second commandment. Only geometric ornaments, plant motifs, texts. On the south wall hangs a red banner, the standard of Prague's Jewish community. It depicts the Star of David, an appointed Jewish hat, what Jews were forced to wear as a distinguishing mark. Emperor Ferdinand II granted the community the right to have its own flag in 1527 in gratitude for defending Prague from the Swedes. Initially, the synagogue was built only for men. In the 17th century, low women's annexes with separate entrances were added to the north and west walls. Women sit there during services, watching through narrow slits in the wall, tsitzim. This may seem like discrimination, but in Orthodox Judaism, separation of sexes during prayer is the norm. It is believed that this helps to concentrate on communicating with God, not to be distracted. Before electrification, the synagogue was lit by chandeliers and oil lamps. Now, historic metal chandeliers and candlesticks are preserved, but electricity is used. During services, the light is dimmed, which creates an atmosphere of mystical solemnity. Legends and mysticism. Above the main hall is an attic room with wooden beams. According to the main legend, in the attic of the Old New Synagogue, Rabbi Meherel hid the body of the Golem, a clay giant he created in the 1580s to protect Jews from pogroms and blood libels. Rabbi Lowe created the Golem in response to blood libel. Christians accused Jews of murdering Christian children to use their blood in matzah. In the 1580s, pogroms intensified. The Meherel went down to the banks of the Vltava at night with 2 students. They molded a 3-meter-tall human figure from clay. The rabbi walked around it 7 times, reading incantations from the Book of Creation. Then he wrote the word on the Golem's forehead, put a parchment with the name of God in his mouth, and the Golem came to life. The Golem couldn't speak, but was incredibly strong and obeyed the rabbi's orders. He patrolled the ghetto at night, exposed infant corpses planted in Jewish homes, thwarted conspiracies. Once the Meherel forgot to deactivate the Golem before Shabbat. The Golem went mad, began smashing houses, throwing stones. The rabbi interrupted the Sabbath prayer, found the Golem, and erased the letter Aleph on his forehead. What remained was the Golem crumbled. Entry to the attic was forbidden for centuries. In 1883, a rabbi went up there and allegedly saw dust-covered forms resembling a human body. In the 1920s, Czech journalists received permission to go up and found only old Talith and torn prayer books. But the legend lives. They say that in dangerous times, the Golem can return. The Golem story influenced all of European culture, from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to modern robots and AI. This is the archetype of creation that escaped the creator's control. According to legend, when the builders laid the foundation, angels flew down from heaven and brought stones from the destroyed Second Temple. These stones are embedded in the masonry. That's why the synagogue is invulnerable to fire and enemies. Indeed, all the surrounding houses burned during fires, but the Old New Synagogue survived. After the war, services resumed here. Conclusion: I didn't show you all the synagogues of Josefov. There are 6, and each has its own story. But I showed you the main thing. Memory 1. In the Old New Synagogue, services are still held. In the Spanish, concerts are played. As the Jewish tradition says, Zachor, remember, not for the sake of the dead. They can no longer be helped. For our sake, so that we recognize evil when we see it, so that we don't let this happen again. Thank you for watching. And thank you for remembering with me.